What are you not told about the world wars? What's going on, people? My name is Zulfikar and welcome to my YouTube channel, which is about helping you overcome the conditioning and programming of this degenerate society we find ourselves in today, so that you can see past all the lies and the deceit and fashion for yourself a life of happiness, fulfillment and contentment. If you like the sound of that, please go ahead and click the subscribe button so you can get more content on these topics. So this video is a continuation from the previous videos about whether we're in the end times and about the different generations of warfare and what's going on around the world at the moment. So this video is about going back into recent history, and we're going to take a look at World War I and World War II. Now, what you are typically told about the world wars is that they were started and triggered by the assassination of the Archduke of Austria and because of the rise of Nazi Germany and what Hitler did in World War II. But the thing with world wars is that there are many strategic objectives to be achieved rather than it happening because of one thing or the other. So there are many different things going on, and most of the things we are not taught about and we are not told. So there are many different aspects to both world wars. I am going to be focusing on two things which mostly are held from the public, and they're certainly not taught in the history book. So obviously I did really well at history in GCSE and A level, and we spoke a lot, or we were taught a lot about both world wars, but we were never taught about the two things that I'm going to be talking about in this video. The first objective, which you're not taught about, is that the wars allowed for the introduction of a new economic system because it became illegal to hold gold. By making it illegal to hold gold, what they did was they convinced people to hand in all of their gold, and in exchange they received dollars. In other words, they took away the real wealth that people had and replaced it with this fake fiat dollar currency. And when dollars were no longer backed by gold, they were allowed to be printed at will. The second thing, which isn't talked about much, especially here in the Western world, is the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate. The Ottomans at the time of the First World War had control over Palestine and therefore had control over Jerusalem. Now, the father of Zionism, a gentleman by the name of Theodor Herzl, tried to negotiate Palestine away from the Ottomans in 1896, which obviously was well before World War I. The Ottomans, however, refused his request. So one of the strategic objectives of World War I was to destroy the Ottoman Caliphate, and World War I was successful in bringing about the destruction of the Ottoman Caliphate. Now, at the time, the British were really sneaky in that they basically negotiated with three different parties. They basically conspired with the Zionists, they conspired with the French in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and they also conspired with the Saudis, and they promised the land of Palestine to each of these three separate groups in order to receive their assistance and support for the war and against the Ottoman Empire. Eventually, Palestine was gifted by the British to the Zionists well before the Ottoman Empire fell in the infamous Balfour Declaration. And who was the Balfour Declaration addressed to? The one and only Lord Rothschild. So if World War I paved the way for the end of the Ottoman Caliphate, what did World War II do? Well, that allowed for the actual creation of the State of Israel. So Israel came into existence as a state after World War II. Now bear in mind that the plans for Israel were created well before World War I. So this was a real strategic objective to use both world wars to bring in the state of Israel. So why are these two objectives both important for the world we live in today? Well, because what you're seeing now is the Rona being used to implement some grand strategic objectives. On the face of it, it seems like there's a fight against the virus, but in the background there are multiple objectives trying to be implemented. Firstly, we're seeing a huge economic shift. We're actively seeing the fall of the fiat currency and the dollar, and we're seeing ridiculous amounts of borrowing and lending, and this is simply a system which is unsustainable at the present moment. And whilst the dollar collapses, what we're also seeing is the rise of the digital currency. So at the moment it's Bitcoin, which is the granddaddy of them all, but there are so many other cryptocurrencies. But what's going to happen is these are all paving the way for something like the Bitcoin or the Amero or some kind of digital currency backed by government. So you're going to be seeing the transfer from the fiat system to the digital system, which is going to be backed by a government, or it's going to be backed by probably a world government, which is what the plan is, and this is where we're headed at the moment. So what happened with the First World War is that it shifted the balance of power from Britain to the United States. You had what was called Pax Britannica. That's when Britain was the ruling state in the world. It was the most powerful state in the world. The world wars shifted that balance of power to the United States of America, and since the world wars, the United States of America has been the most powerful and dominant country in the world. Pax Britannica became Pax Americana. So what we're seeing now is Pax Americana being replaced by Pax Judaica. The balance of power is being shifted from the United States of America to Israel, and more importantly to Jerusalem. That's why in the last video I told you that the most important and most significant thing that Donald Trump did was to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Israel will be the next superpower. But oh wait, you're being primed to view China as the next superpower. So what's going on there? Well, that's something I will explain in another video. What you also need to be paying attention to is what's happening in the Muslim world. You see, the Saudis have officially recognized the state of Israel, and other Muslim countries are being pressurized to do the same thing. Pakistan is one of those Muslim countries that was pressurized to recognize the state of Israel. At the time they declined, and as a result the Saudis recalled $1 billion loan, and it was China that bailed Pakistan out of that predicament. Now the reason I mention Pakistan is because Pakistan is very important, not because of any bias I have for being a Pakistani myself, but simply because Pakistan is the only Muslim nation to have nuclear weapons. You see, the war on terror was a front. The whole purpose of the war on terror was to destabilize the countries and the region around the state of Israel. The point was to create strife in these Muslim countries and keep them fighting amongst themselves, keep them divided, keep them weak, so as to prevent the re-establishment of the Islamic Caliphate. To understand more about that, please watch the video about the different generations of warfare, namely 4th, 5th and 6th generation warfare, which will give you an indication of how regions are destroyed without a direct war. Now, some of the other things that are interesting that need to be paid attention to are the skirmishes between India and China, Because here's the thing, India and Pakistan are perennial enemies politically. Pakistan is a crucial and strategic ally of China, whereas India is a crucial and strategic ally of Israel. At the moment, the Saudis have allied with Israel, and the Turks are interesting because they really haven't forgiven the Saudis for what they did back in World War One and the destruction of the Ottoman Caliphate, but they're stuck between a rock and a hard place because they are a member of NATO as well. It will be interesting to see which side the Turks take. However, given their relationship with Pakistan and given their stance against the Saudis, it's not hard to imagine which side they will take. Not to mention, President Erdogan seems to be very keen about re-establishing the Ottoman Caliphate. Now, Turkey is also a very important player because of Istanbul. You see, throughout history, there are certain parts in the world where power moves are made consistently. Two of those places are Jerusalem and Istanbul, which was previously known as Constantinople. So you can go from biblical tales to empires to crusades, and Jewish, Christian and Islamic eschatology are pretty similar in what they say and are in line with current political events. Studying these will help you understand the importance of Jerusalem. Now, the end times have always been talked about. As I mentioned in a previous video, religions always talk about the end times. More of this chatter has become popular in recent months and weeks, especially because of the pandemic. But the interesting thing is that even the non-religious people are also talking about end times. And even if they're not talking about the end times as an end of the world event or destruction of the world, they're talking about a great shift or a great awakening or entering a new age, which is going to cause the end of the world as we know it. In other words, there seems to be a unanimous feeling across all of the traditions and all of the philosophies that we are entering a phase of great pain, which is then going to be followed by a period of great bliss. Now, this is just a reminder and a disclaimer not to take anything I say as truth. Like I said previously, my intent here is not to put out statements and make you believe what I say. My intent is for you to simply be given the fire to do the research for yourself and explore these themes and topics by independently and critically thinking by yourself. So, like I explained in a previous video, all that I spoke about in this video was drafted back in December, November 2020. And the reason I bring that up is because since then a lot has happened in the world. Obviously, Israel and Palestine flared up again. There was trouble in that region. There's been trouble in Afghanistan, and there's been trouble in South America, and that's on top of all the things happening around the world, especially in Australia and Canada. A few interesting things happened just before Afghanistan was lost by the United States. It didn't make big news in the West, but I do follow news in the Pakistan region, and big news over there was just before the United States left, they asked Pakistan for more US bases to be implemented in Pakistan. Now, the Americans deny this, but historically Pakistan gave bases to the United States throughout the war on terror, and those bases were used to conduct operations inside Afghanistan and even inside of Pakistan. This time, when they asked for bases, the Pakistani government, namely the Prime Minister Imran Khan, rejected it. He did not allow the Americans to have any bases inside of Pakistan. Now, since Pakistan refused to give bases to the United States, although the United States rejects that they even requested it, there have, surprise, been a number of terrorist activities inside of Pakistan. A couple of those terrorist acts have been a direct hit on Chinese workers inside of Pakistan, and I'm certain the repercussions for that are still yet to be felt. Once again, I request that you go back and watch the video and read the post about the different generations of warfare, because this video isn't for or against any type of people, religion or nation. As the generations of warfare video emphasized, this is bigger than that. It's murky waters now. Ultimately, there is a bigger hand, a bigger evil that's playing in the background. It's no longer that simple to differentiate between labels, and those labels being religion, country, culture, etc. The real players are behind the scenes. We don't know who they are, and we don't know what they're really up to. Governments, politicians and places, these are all puppets where the masters behind the scenes are pulling all the strings. Just remember, corporations run the world, not countries. I did an entire video series about this, which I'll put up on screen now and in the description below. Please watch those videos, because once again I reiterate, this isn't about a particular religion being on the right side, and it isn't about a particular people being on the right side. It's just not that simple anymore. There's just too much deception, there are too many lies, and it's going to take a lot more to really analyze the situation than looking at the facts, because as I said last time, seeing is no longer believing. You need to be able to study these things and need to have some kind of spiritual intuition to try and work out what's really going on. If you enjoyed this content, please give it a thumbs up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What is your assessment of global political events going on right now? I would love to hear your thoughts and love to start a discussion. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, because in the next video I'm going to be talking more about why Jerusalem is so important. Until then, take care now. Bye bye.